This is an ancient Hindu festival, but this year in Gujarat, it was celebrated by crowds waving swords outside a mosque as those inside looked on apparently terrified. 1,000 miles away, another huge crowd in another Muslim area. As the police stood by, they screamed insults that are too vicious to broadcast. And in mosques, crowds hoisted Hindu nationalist flags on roofs and minarets. Events like this happened all over India this month, leading some to claim the festival's violence could and should have been avoided. Most of the footage in this report has swept Indian social media. We haven't been able to verify all of it, but in total, it paints a disturbing picture of a violent fortnight here. Take one area, Khargone, in Madhya Pradesh, central India. Footage shows anti-Muslim songs were played loudly by huge crowds who were waving swords in a Muslim area. Before long, stones were exchanged between the festival goers and local Muslims. The BJP say this was an organized attack by a proscribed Islamic terror group. Eyewitnesses say that the Hindu festival goers then went on a rampage in Muslim areas. This former police officer is Muslim and lives in Khargone. He spoke to Wire India.
क्या है ये?
पेट्रोल बम फेंके थे पर ये कुर्ते पे मेरे को जो थोड़ी में जो चोट लगी इससे खून निकला.
To his shock, he said his long-time neighbor, a Hindu, also joined in the attack.
देख अनिल, अपन पड़ोसी है. मैं मेरे मकान में तू भी अंदर चले जा, तू फालतू की ये खुराफात मत करे. अब ते कुछ नहीं रहना है. बाकी नहीं वो तो गाली बकते रहे. ये बोले एक ही मकान है मुसलमान का, उसकी अनिल की पत्नी बोल रही थी ये इसको आग लगा दो.
And then, early the next morning, the local BJP government sent bulldozers and police to Khargone. They simply tore Muslim houses down. The BJP state minister said there was no other choice.
आरोपी अपराधी कहां से आ गए? बात जो सामने दिख रहा है, इसमें आरोप कैसे कह रहे हो आप? जो विजुअल में पत्थर फेंकते दिख रहा है, जो फुटेज में पत्थर फेंकते दिख रहा है, उसको भी आरोपी कह रहे हो?
उसको भी तो ड्यू प्रोसेस दिया जाएगा ना कानून का.
कैसे ड्यू प्रोसेस कानून का दे रहे हैं ना? उसको जेल भेज रहे हैं, वो कानून में जाएगा.
Critics say the authorities are blaming victims but ignoring a targeted campaign by right-wing Hindu figures that took place before the violence. For example, in Khargone, just hours before the trouble, a high-profile BJP member told a crowd to take violent action.
आज खरगोन की धरती से मैं उन्हें ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि जो जिस घर से कुर्बान निकलेगा उस घर में घुसकर मारेंगे.
A few days earlier, a local priest in the same state whose sermons reach millions had this prescient advice. Similar scenes have played out across India in the last 2 weeks. In Uttar Pradesh, a so-called holy man riled up a Hindu crowd who had gathered in a Muslim area. As he preached rape to young men, he had armed police protection. After a public outcry, he was eventually arrested. Despite all the violence, the Prime Minister has not commented. And while he welcomes Boris Johnson, he knows India enjoys a crucial geopolitical role. So while ordinary Muslims may hope international leaders will raise their concerns, they fear it is unlikely.
Well, earlier I spoke to the ruling BJP's Vice President Jay Panda, and I began by asking for his response to the rush of violence across the country.
I haven't seen what you have telecast just now, but I can tell you that recently there have been attacks on Ram Navami processions, which is the equivalent of attacking people singing Christmas carols out on the streets. Now, there have been provocative statements by people across the spectrum. We don't condone it. Those who claim affiliation with the BJP are they're just as susceptible to action. There are members from other parties like the Congress and the Aam Aadmi Party who are openly provocative, who are openly threatening that they would take action against processions. Now that is just not on. Our constitution doesn't allow no-go zones. We are very clear that the BJP doesn't condone any kind of extremist action, no matter who they allege to be with, but we will crack down on criminal elements who are flouting the law.
As the government in charge, what are you actually doing to calm down what could become incredibly inflammatory tensions inside India?
Well, one important thing is some of these people who are trying to raise this scaremongering are deliberately being provocative. They are trying to spin a false narrative as if there is a bias against Muslims, for instance. There isn't. The BJP is very clear that we are a constitutional party. We believe that every Indian is equal, irrespective of religion or caste or creed.
Let's move on to the Prime Minister's visit, our Prime Minister's visit to Delhi today. We know what Boris Johnson wants out of India. He wants a special trade agreement. He wants India as part of Britain's post-Brexit global British role. What does India want from Britain in return?
Well, India and the UK have a historical relationship. I think we are two countries across continents who understand each other very well. And if you look at trade, for instance, recently there was a Grant Thornton report which pointed out that there are as many as 850 Indian companies operating in the UK. It does serve both our interests to have Indian talent operate globally, including in the UK.
Because you have a middle class now that's, hundreds of millions strong. A lot of those people want to travel, they want to study in the UK, they want to work in the UK, at least for some of the time. As a result of this visit, will it become easier for those Indians to do that in Britain?
We hope so. In fact, in recent interactions that I've had with the British High Commission here and with others, I get a sense that the UK recognizes the potential of Indian students going back to the UK in larger numbers, and B, if more trade is to happen between our two countries, there has to be a greater flow of people-to-people connect.
Now, as you know, Prime Minister Johnson is widely heralded by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, as being one of his strongest allies, one of the greatest critics of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Will your Prime Minister, Modi, join Boris Johnson by naming and shaming Russia for what it is doing in this war?
The Modi government has been very explicit about the unfortunate situation in Ukraine. We have made it very clear that war is not the solution, aggression and hostility is not the solution.
You're not criticizing Russia by name, though. You're barely calling it a war and an invasion.
There is a great deal of hypocrisy in other nations. And as our foreign minister pointed out last week, many European nations buy more energy from Russia in an afternoon than we do in a month. And this despite the strong stands they have taken.
Who are you more afraid of, China or Russia?
Well, in the United States these days, there is a phrase that's doing the rounds, which says that Russia is the hurricane, but China is climate change. We have a far, far greater problem that emanates from or somehow originates from Chinese actions than from anybody else.
Vijay Panda, thank you very much.
Thank you.